Alright, the purpose of this video is to talk about making a logo. Quite often is the case where you can scour the internet and you can't find what you're looking for, so sometimes you just have to make it. It's not ideal. It's much better to start with, the actual thing, but it's come to my attention that this is probably the best picture of this particular logo that we can find. So if anybody gets a chance to go to a racetrack and this logo exists, if you can get a straight on shot of it, it'd be greatly appreciated. But it is the Musco logo, Musco Lighting. That's been around for a while. Their logo is widely available on the internet, as you can see. This is a high resolution version. This is their current logos. They've changed to Musco Lighting. You'll still find just that section on some of the commercial lighting. Apparently this says Mertran, Mirtran. It's got some what looks like electric lines coming out of the side of it, or light lines, or however you want to describe that, but it's got a little registered logo on the side. Cannot find any information that contains this. Sometimes you can look through like PDF files of the on the website. Done an exhaustive search, can't find it. This is probably the best picture that we have available. So I'm going to attempt to make this or something very close to it using what we have here. This image in particular is, so I got an image size 1652 by 1100. That's decent to work with. It's going to end up being very small when it's done, but I'm going to take the time to make this logo. I want to make it decent size. So now this logo presents some unique challenges, and honestly, when you get experience with Photoshop, this is a 5-minute task, really, but I'm going to probably make this into a half-hour, 45-minute video talking about all the different settings in Photoshop. So this is a basic overview of my workflow, how I have Photoshop set up. You can see the layout's fairly clean, simple. When you first start Photoshop CS6, which this is CS6 by the way, very crowded. There's a lot of toolbars and things that you don't need. You can close each one of those windows. I don't want to do it because I like the way this is set up. You can go through and change the workspace. You've got all of your different options and things here. I've got swatches, layers, options, tools. You can turn on and off anything that you use a lot of. There are add-on tools that you can add to it. So this is the layout. Any one of these things, you can grab the title bar. You can see the darker area up here with the little arrow. Little arrow in this case, makes that a single row of buttons. I like it up here. It's a little bit easier to grab and differentiate the tools. Talk a little bit about that. You can grab that menu right there, break that out if you want it to be in a separate window. Or you can see on the left side where that blue bar is. That means that it will automatically snap to that area. Once it's snapped there, it's completely locked. I can also grab that little dashed area and bring it out too. Like I said, this is the way I like it set up. All of these tools that have the little arrow to the right, or the bottom right corner down here where the mouse cursor is, it's hard to see, but if you left click and hold, it will bring up the alternative tools that are available right there. And this one I have the magic wand. This one here I have the polygonal lasso tool. This one I have the rectangular marquee. That's just the move selection. You've got the eyedropper tool here. There's a couple different tools that you can use. If you want to change the tool that you have selected in that icon, usually you don't have to left click. Usually when you let go over top of that, it will automatically switch to it. So if I want the eyedropper, I left click, hold, mouse over, and let go, and then it pops that tool into that space. You got the paintbrush tool, you got pencil, which is 1 pixel. I use the brush tool. Brush tool can have, you know, different settings here. You've got airbrush, you've got paint. Typically these are all, you know, this top row is just a circle that is 53 pixels with very little anti-aliasing around the outside of it. When I move this hardness slider down, and I'll just do a quick swipe here just so you can see. You can see how it has a soft edge. I'll do the same thing with hardness 100%. You can see it's completely, zoom in a little bit so it's a little more obvious. You can see it's, you know, it still has anti-aliasing on the edges, but it's a lot, you know, less blurry and a lot more defined edge, I guess. So we'll undo both of those. Now to step backwards in this, you can do step backwards, edit, step backwards, or you can do Control-Alt-Z. Also does the same thing. Most of the shortcuts up here, you can see it in the menu. Step backwards, Alt, Control-Z. I said that backwards, but also has that feature of paste in place. Shift Control V. Use that quite a bit for wireframes or pasting images. If you have transparency in the image and want it pasted in the exact same position, paste into place comes into handy right there without making little. I'm also using Control plus and minus on the numpad, so I'm hitting Control and then numpad plus, numpad subtract. I know that it's not showing up in the little screen there. Yeah, text is too big, but hopefully I'm not skipping over too much. So what I need to do is remove the information from the photo or this logo that I don't need and add in the missing Mert logo right here. So I'm going to hit the square marquee tool. I'm going to click outside the workspace here, and I'm going to left click and drag. As soon as it hits the image up here in the left hand corner, it starts the marquee tool. I know doing that, it puts it automatically in the far upper left corner, and it stops drawing in the bottom right corner if I did it that way. You know, over here, I know that is edge to edge selection right there. You can also do edit select all. I just prefer to do it this way. So I'm going to hit Control C, and then I'm going to hit Control V. What I did was copied the background image and posted it as a new layer. Notice the background image is locked. If you open an image, it automatically applies it as a background layer and locks it. You can unlock it here by hitting the lock icon. I typically prefer to just get it out in its own layer that's not locked. Then I'll go over here, select the background layer, and I'll hit delete on the keyboard. Removes that. Now I know that there's nothing behind this. There's no extra information. I don't have any duplicates. I can clearly see that. You can get in the habit of renaming stuff. If you double click over the name, you can type in whatever you want there. The other way to do it is, no, I guess that's the only way to do it. Is it single click? No. Just double click over the layer one there and then rename it whatever you want. Working on a logo like this, I want to have a transparent background while I'm working, so and I'll create my own background layer in just a second. Just give me some contrast. But for right now, I want to get the information out of the image, and I want to be looking at a transparent background to see that. So some of the things, I've got the magic wand tool. We'll talk about up here at the top, it says tolerance of 75. It is 75 color shades based on what you click on. So I'm setting over white, so 75 shades of white towards black or whatever is next to it. Will select when I do this. So I clicked anywhere on the white background. Now you notice it selected the inside of the O, all these little gaps in here. Vice versa, if I left clicked inside the O, it automatically selected everything outside of the O as well. If I anti-aliasing, that's the smoothness of the edge of the selection. Contiguous means, and if I want to end the marquee selection, I'll just click outside the workspace, left click. Excuse me. Now I have contiguous selected, so what that means, if I click inside the O, it only selects inside the O. It doesn't select outside the O. Vice versa, if I click outside, it selects everything that it can physically connect to. See inside the P's here, the E, the A, none of that stuff inside is selected. Now what I can do, if there are certain things that you don't want to select and certain things you do, you may want to do it this way, and then what you can do is hit Shift and you see a little plus sign pop up under that marquee there on the cursor. Now when I left click, I can add to that selection. So if I go over here, I can pick and choose which ones of those that I want to be added to the current selection. So that's one way to do that. The quick way, like it says, magic wand without contiguous. Just click anywhere on the white. Now I've got all that selected. I want to delete all that. Hit delete. Now it's gone. Like I said, I've got a transparent background. Transparency is a checkerboard pattern in this case. For this particular logo, we're not going to use any of the information down here, so I'm drag selecting from the bottom. I know I've got pretty close to the bottom of that Musco there, and just deleted all that information. Let's go back to the magic wand. I want to get this yellow part here. Same settings, 75, color shades, anti-aliasing on. If you're working with say a TSD or grass logo, you would want the anti-aliasing turned off when you're doing this outside selection. It will give you a much crisper, defined edge with less bleed through. And I'll talk about that in another video, because there are several tips and tricks that you can use to do if you want to put it on it like a pink background for a single image TSD or something, which this is not, so I'm not going to talk about that in this video. But so I want to get rid of the yellow there. I want to keep the registered. You'll notice some artifacting going on. Until I save this, it doesn't really save every single thing that happens. So you may see some ghosting of the old stuff when you zoom in and out. Excuse me. So the next tool, I want to get rid of this here. I can use the square marquee selection and go through in here and carefully making sure I don't cut off any of that stuff that I need. Very quickly becomes tedious. So the best way to use that, you can use the lasso tool, which is kind of like a pen tool. I'm left click and holding. It'll allow me to draw. Kind of with a mouse, it gets kind of difficult to. So I don't want to do that. What I want to do is the polygonal lasso tool. Every time I left click, it's adding a point-to-point line. So there are a couple ways to end your selection. You can see you get much more precise with that. Now you can do a really big stretch. Any one of these marquee tools, by the way, if you get close to the edge, it'll automatically zoom up and down, left and right. So In this case, I want to end my selection, so there are two ways to do it. I can get close to the original starting point and just left click, or if I reselect it all, the other thing I can do is double click, and it will draw a straight line from where I just double clicked over to the start. So that's got that selected, so I can remove that. Next thing I want to do is go back to the square. I can left click anywhere outside of that one. What I can do in this case, since I've got a lot of information that I want to get rid of, is I made a box bigger than I need it to be because I want to cut this stuff off the bottom of that. I'm using the up arrow to move that marquee selection. And I'll go ahead and chop that little bit off. You can see a little bit of transparency left behind. So I'm just checking to make sure what's inside of that. So I've got everything that I need removed inside of that. Hit delete, removes it. And you can see I've got a little cutout here, and I need to fill in some missing information here. So you can see I could redraw that precisely, or I can just use the down arrow to bump that down, that 1 pixel there. By the way, if you zoom in and you start getting grid lines, and maybe you don't want that grid line there, maybe it's hard to look at for you, you can hit Control H and it will turn that grid line off. So I've got, you know, a marquee around the information that I need to fill in. You can do the same thing with the, you know, the polygon lasso tool. Gives you a, you know, a more weird shape like that, but in this case, you know, a square would be fine. So I'm gonna hit the eyedropper, and by the way, if it's not there, you can hit the eyedropper. You know, left click, hold, mouse over, eyedropper. There's the eyedropper tool. So I'm gonna left click on one of the colors. You know, I can left click on the color swatches. You've got 2 color swatches. These are your main 2. The one at the top left is going to be the one that all of your tools are going to use. That's where your eyedropper selection is going to go. If you wanted to grab 2 colors to work with out of something, what you can do is switch that over to your back selection or color swatch, and now you've got, you know, another one. Obviously that's the same color, but you could pick and choose any other random color you wanted there. So for this case, we'll go ahead and use that, but the top left one is the one that you're going to use. Now, the other thing you can do is hit that little icon right there, and we'll switch it back to true black and true white if you need true black or true white. You know, quickly there's true white, quickly there's true black. Right now we want that blue color. I'm going to go to the left click and hold brush tool. You can see the brush is fairly large. It's actually 53 pixels, so it means I'm zoomed in pretty zoomed in there. But if you notice, outside of that bounding box, nothing happens until it goes inside the bounding box, or the marquee tool. So I'm left clicking out here, nothing's happening because I have a marquee tool. Now if I get rid of the marquee tool and go back to the paintbrush, then I can draw outside there. But in this case, I want to limit my drawing inside of that box. You know, basically it's just like that. What I can do is make that a little bit smaller so it's a little more visible of what's going on there. So I'm left clicking outside the box, nothing's happening, and then right there, as soon as it gets inside the box, it starts drawing. Now it's a small brush in that case. We'll go over some of the settings here. Let's go ahead and fill that in, and then I'll go over some of the settings. So that's filled in. Get rid of the bounding box or the marquee tool. In this case, we'll just do white, and we'll go to paintbrush. I've got the 2B pencil, and I've got 14 pixels, hardness 100%. You can select any one of these top rows here, and it brings up the same settings at the top. I don't have a marquee tool selected, so I can draw anywhere I want. Just hitting Control Z to undo. can also do step backwards. So I'm hitting that little arrow to the right there of this right here. I can change the size and diameter of the brush. I'll go with somewhere around 30. You can also type into that box if you want to get more precise. Now the hardness is the edge. So if I turn this all the way down to like 13%, you can see you get a very soft edge on that. If I turn the hardness all the way up, you get a very hard edge, a very crisp edge on that. So that's the paint tool. I filled in the missing information. Next thing I want to do, we'll talk about grid lines on here. I can't cover every single thing in Photoshop, but what I wanted to show now is I'm going to create a guide because I want to snap this logo down here to the middle. So I'm going to hit New Guide. I'm going to make a horizontal guide, and I want to go into this box here and I want to type 50%. That's going to give me a guide exactly halfway down that image. So now you can see this guide here, so I can go to this tool here, and I think I'll have to redo it if I do it, but I can see how that changes right there. Actually, I can go ahead, as long as I don't let go. I can let go anywhere I want. I can put this on, up here, but right now I'm going to leave it in the center because I know it's in the center. I've got snaps turned on for the moving. That is in view, and I've got snap turned on right there, and then snap to, guides, layers, document bounds, or none. Or I can just turn snaps off. You can see how I can freehand it now. Absolutely no snaps. I can put that anywhere I want. So back where it was, turn snap back on. Holding right shift, and it locks the left and right axis. You can see how it snapped to that center. So now that is centered up and down to that guideline. Comes in very useful for multiple layers. There's 1,000 different ways to use that. For right now, I don't want that guide visible. Turn snap off. I will probably use, actually I'm going to go ahead and leave that right there. And I'm going to go ahead and set that. You do not have to do it that way, but that Mert logo is going to be right on the same plane or same level or same height as that. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that guideline right there. So we'll leave that like that. Next thing I want to do is I want to change the color of that. I also want to make a background layer. So I'm going to hit Control Shift N. I created a new layer over here. Now I want to drag that layer down. I also want to change that to black in this case. So I'm going to hit the paint bucket tool right there, paint bucket. You've got to pay attention up here. I'm not going to go into great detail on every single one of these because it's going to drag out. But you've got the same settings up here: tolerance, anti-alias, contiguous. All those settings are very similar. You just have to play around with them in each scenario and see what works best for you. But pay attention up here for each one of the tools, because that's where the settings for that tool is, up here. Pardon me. So I want to fill that in with black, so I'm just going to use the paint bucket, fill that in with black. Now I have a nice black background. Next up would be to change the color of the information that we have right now on the existing layer. There are two ways to do that I would normally use. You could use paint bucket, or you could use a layer style, and I'll show you which one I prefer. If you use paint bucket, we'll switch the color swatch to white. In this case, I'm going to make it white. That's a pretty good result. Tolerance of 50, anti-aliasing, and contiguous off. It gives a pretty decent result. I'll show why that may not be the best result. You can see how you have some artifacting going on in the text itself, and also the registered logo. It's very skinny. If I click over here, you can see how that registered logo actually loses a lot of the anti-aliasing on the edges. It gets a lot crisper, it gets a lot bigger. In this case, might not necessarily be a bad thing, but in some cases it might be. So I'll show you a better way to do it in this case, which is double clicking on the layer. You can double click on the image or the preview image right here, or the layer thumbnail, or you can double click out here next to the title. Don't double click on the title because you can change the title that way. If you want to label everything, you can type in whatever you want to do it that way if you're working with hundreds of layers, and it can get up to that high on some things. You can change the name and get a little more organized. Like I said, you can right click over here, change colors if you want to get more organized, if you have a certain way to do things there. So working with layers, you end up with thousands of layers and hundreds of layers and everything. It gets a little confusing sometimes, so you want to get in the habit more than I do of being more organized with it, but it's too late for me. So don't try to pick up my bad habits, try to pick up some good tips there. Try to be more organized than I am. So the other way to change that color is to double click on that layer, and you've got color or layer styles. In this case I want to do color overlay. So that was just, you can click any one of these and it'll automatically apply. So I'm going to do a color overlay, and I want to make it white. I could also, when this window is open, I can also click on any one of my swatches over here. So that's another good reason to have those swatches available on your workspaces when those tools are open. You can either select from the image, select from the color swatches, or select from your main color swatches over here. Really helps out with speed. You got to get the information as quickly as possible. Now when I zoom back in to the registered here, if you notice, it adds the effects and the color overlay. If I turn that on and off, you can see the size of that register does not change very much at all. In fact, it doesn't really change at all. You can turn all of your effects off. If you've got multiple layer effects on, you can turn them all on by hitting that eye icon right there, or turn each individual effect on and off by selecting the eye next to it. You can also turn the layer on and off by selecting that eye right there. So you can see the layer style color overlay gives you a better result, gives you a better edge. I'm mainly speaking just for the working with high resolution images or logos, and trying to make a good looking logo when you're done. I don't think I'm going to get all the way through this because this is really dragging out. I'm going over a lot more of the basics than I intended to, but I want to get at least the Mertran, painted on here. So at this point, I'm going to go to the text tool, horizontal text. There are vertical text. These are the only two that I used as horizontal text. I'll be honest with you, it's about the only one I use. Again, you've got different settings up here. You've got your font. This way you pull from your Windows font folder, so whatever fonts you have installed, it will be in this list. Looking at the original, Helvetica New is pretty close, to be honest with you. The first thing you want to do is left click and drag after you've selected your text tool over here. You can see this ginormous blinking icon there. If I type a letter, it's pretty big. 100 points, that's way too big. The thing about the text tool, This is if I make a change up here, see nothing happened. That's because the text wasn't selected. If I select the text by left click and dragging, highlighting the text, it switches back to 100. So now, with it highlighted, and I make a change up there, if the color's wrong, you can change the color there. Again, the eyedropper works on any one of the color swatches or in the image itself or wherever. So it's really handy to have that stuff there. Alright, so what I'm going to do, oops, Mertran, I believe that's correct, yes, Mertran. Make that a little bit smaller, so I got to highlight it. We'll go down to 18. Now we'll move that. I'm on free, so it's not snapping or anything like that. I'm going to move this off screen. You won't be able to see it, but I need to compare this. So it looks like it's a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. So I've got the text. There's a couple of different ways to do this part as well. I'm going to Marquee select. I'm going to right click anywhere, and I'm going to free transform with that selected. Now you notice when I did that free transform, that is the size of that original text box that I drew. I don't necessarily want that bounding box to be that big. So what I can do is I can double click on the text. I can bring this text bounding box in a little bit. Now it's going to move it over and shift it and everything. So I'm going to have to hit the checkbox. Move this over towards the middle here so I can do this a little bit better. So I just want that text box to be a little bit closer to the actual size of it. So that's a little bit better now. Right click on anywhere in that layer, free transform. Now you can see that bounding box is a lot closer to the right size. It's a little bit easier to work with and everything. So I want the bottom of the text to be close to there, so I'm holding shift to move that on that horizontal. So it needs to be, let's see, a little bit further over. Also has a registered logo at the end of it, so I'm going to check that as well. I'll just take this registered logo and paste it up there. I'll probably quickly show that. So it looks like it needs to be a little bit shorter, so I'm going to, you've got rotating tools if you mouse over, so pay attention to where your mouse is. I can grab the corner, I can change it like this. Now all these changes are happening dynamically. If you notice, it's still a text layer, so I can go back and edit the text at this point. I have not rasterized. Rasterized means converting a dynamic component to a non-dynamic component. You're basically taking the text part out of it and making it an image at that point. Notice my line moved a little bit when I did that. It's not exactly working off of the image itself because it's still dynamic. It's actually still working off the text bounding box. So we got a little bit wider. Just a little bit there. So that's good for this demonstration. As far as the lines, I'll quickly go over how you would do that. You would go, the fill color would be white, stroke color would be white. Using that line tool right there. It's basically left click, hold, and drag. I've gone over that in another video as well, but that's how you get shapes like that. Non-square shapes, sometimes you would use this to create a line as well, and use the paintbrush to paint it that way. But if the lines aren't perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical, then that wouldn't work. You would have to do it this way. So I will cancel that selection there. You notice it created those shapes in different layers, so that's easy to turn on and off or change. I'll quickly talk about the register now. A couple different workflow ways to do this as well. You notice the color overlay is there, so if I just take the marquee and I highlight that, in fact I would use the polygon to select that because it's more precise that way. Now if I copy that and I paste that, what I end up with is a blue image because it copied it. Remember, the original was blue. So it copied from the original, but it did not copy that information with the effects. So what I can either apply, the color overlay again. That's one way to do it. And now if I move that out over the black there, you can see it. Now the other way to do that, I'll turn that one off. The other way to do that would be to rasterize this layer. Now you lose the ability to change it. Depends on the complexity, how many elements you're working with, and this is very simple, but in this case what I'm going to do is rasterize. So layer, rasterize, layer style, removes all that information, converts it into just a basic flat image with what you see is what you get, basically. So now if I take that and I select that and I Control C, Control V, you can see exactly what you see is what you get when you copy and paste it, because there was no layer style when I copied it. Hopefully that makes sense between the two. I think that's probably as much as I'm going to get into in this video. It's getting pretty long-winded here. But you can see the basics of it, how I go about doing it. Hopefully that gives you some good insight into Photoshop, and if something isn't there, then make it. I mean, that's what you have to do. So yeah, I'm going to end the video there, and thanks for watching.